In the last Kirara video I made, I anticipated that the most recently announced Dendro character could potentially become a nice piece for Nilou teams. In fact, while she doesn't have the same continuous off-field application consistency as some other Dendro units, there are some aspects in her kit that make her application rather unique in the Dendro context, and after the internal cooldown info about her kit came out, my assumptions were for the most part proven to be right. In this video, I'll explain why she can work well for Nilou, and I'll give you some compositions ideas. First and foremost, let's go through Kirara's application methods. As a baseline, she's a character that will be able to apply most of her application right off the bat. In fact, at Constellation 0, Kirara has basically no mean to apply Dendro off-field, so her application will entirely happen during the 3 to 4 seconds she'll spend on field. In particular, the hold version of her elemental skill and the elemental burst are what I expect to be taken advantage of in Nilou teams. For context, the hold version of her elemental skill makes Kirara turn into a flying box with cat-like aesthetics that will hit opponents with Dendro damage on a cooldown of 0.5 seconds, which is tied to each opponent. The elemental burst deals an initial Dendro damage hit and spreads around the floor 6 bombs on a rather wide radius. When they explode, these bombs have an AoE radius of 2 meters, which in Razor terms is basically the radius of Kaeya's and Amber's elemental bursts. While it's not incredible range, the bombs should situationally be able to hit up to 2 or 3 opponents depending on the context. Both the bomb's explosions and Kirara's elemental skill attacks follow standard internal cooldown rules. Additionally, when Kirara's elemental skill state ends, she launches a final kick that will also deal Dendro damage. The plan here is to use her elemental burst, use the hold version of the elemental skill for as long as you need to hit a couple targets in range, then release it and swap out to an Hydro on-field applier to make use of all the Dendro aura Kirara applied throughout her 3 to 4 seconds long on-field window. The reason this makes her kinda unique in the Dendro context is that there just aren't many Dendro characters that can apply Dendro in so many different ways in a couple seconds, especially on a semi-AoE scale. To quantify Kirara's elemental application, it's sort of as if you compressed all of Yayao's elemental skill application in a much smaller window, with some additional application on top of that, so it's much more front-loaded. The reason this is good for Nilou Bloom teams is that Bloom hit-related cooldown is tied to the character that generated the reaction in the first place, which is optimal for a context where the triggers aren't generated by just one character, like on Hyperbloom or Burgeon. Basically, you can compress your Bloom's generation into a tighter window and still take advantage of it effectively, which makes the front load valuable. An issue with Kirara, however, is that since at Constellation 0 she has no off-field application, that might make the pairing a bit weird if you're running traditional Nilou teams with on-field Hydro drivers. The issue is that Nahida's elemental skill requires elemental reactions to be activated, so you need off-field Dendro sources other than hers, and consistent Hydro, and since Kirara's application is mostly limited to a short window, you might have issues keeping it up. For this reason, if you have a Constellation 0 Kirara, I expect on-field Nahida with strong off-field Hydro appliers like Shinjo to be a much more consistent option than on-field Hydro appliers variants. Luckily, Constellations round out Kirara's application package, as at Constellation 1 she gets to generate up to 4 more bombs on burst depending on how much HP she has, and Constellation 4 gives her a great source of off-field Dendro application tied to the shield her elemental skill generates. Basically, this constellation can generate a coordinated attack every 4 seconds, and it gets triggered when an auto attack used by the active character hits an opponent. Its internal cooldown is shared with the bomb's cooldown. Now, since this effect is tied to the shield being active, and since Bloom teams are notorious for exposing your characters to huge amounts of damage, I wouldn't say full shield uptime for the whole rotation is guaranteed, but at the very least, this effect should generate 3 or 4 coordinated hits during a 20 or 22 seconds rotation, which is definitely something that can make Kirara viable with on-field hydro appliers as well. Talking about builds for Nilou teams, I'd honestly go for full HP on Kirara there. The reason is that she just won't be triggering blooms herself, as she'll be mostly stacking a lot of Dendro application very quickly. Also, her raw damage is just nothing to write home about without quickening the picture, so prioritizing HP to maximize her shield capabilities is a logical option. The optimal build would be an instructor set with HP stats, which should allow her to reach around 37,000 HP on average artifact standards. At that point, her shield is very durable, especially in the fully stacked version of her hold skill. For context, her first passive allows her to strengthen the shield durability by 20% each time she hits an opponent during her box state, up to 3 times. Also, remember that since it's a Dendro shield, it has increased durability against Dendro attacks, so it will be able to take bloom hits very well, even in AoE. Talking about her energy economy and the rotation structure on Nilou teams, as a baseline, she should be able to use the hold version and the tap version of the elemental skill once per rotation, since the hold version has a longer cooldown, which means you'll need to alternate them. This will allow her to generate 7 particles per rotation, which is pretty good. Thanks to her relatively low burst cost at 60, she won't have much need for energy investment. Regardless, since she doesn't have particular weapon requirements, you can stick to a Favonius or a Sacrificial Sword on her and be completely fine. Overall, I would say Kirara is a nice addition to Nilou teams, as the benefits she brings to the composition application-wise are similar to what Collie can do, and since the latter is generally a top-tier Dendro option for the team, that makes Kirara very appealing, as she also offers serious defensive utility on top of that. I expect her to be a good option at Constellation 0, and a serious contender for the top spot as a second Dendro on the team alongside Nahida at Constellation 4. I'm done for today. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. See you next time!